The plasma rounds screamed overhead as Marcus Chun pressed his back against the twisted wreckage of what used to be a Galactic Council transport. His combat suit's heads-up display showed 17 hostiles closing in from 3 directions. The numbers weren't good, but, then, again, they never were when humanity got involved in alien conflicts. Sector 7 clear, came the voice of his squad leader through the comm. Marcus, what's your status on the eastern flank? Marcus adjusted his grip on his pulse rifle and peered around the debris. The Vorthak had really done a number on this supply convoy. Bodies of various alien species littered the smoking battlefield, Zentorians with their blue-scaled skin, tall Altarian diplomats in their ceremonial robes, and several species he couldn't immediately identify. The acrid smell of burned ozone and alien blood filled his nostrils despite his suit's filtration system. Got movement in the crater 50 meters out, Marcus reported. Looks like survivors. Negative on rescue ops, came the reply. Primary objective is securing the weapons cache. Leave the survivors for cleanup crews. Marcus frowned. That was the thing about working with the Galactic Council's military forces. They had a habit of writing off casualties when it interfered with their missions. But Marcus hadn't spent 3 tours fighting alongside aliens just to abandon wounded beings who might still have a chance. Copy that, command. Moving to secondary position, Marcus switched off his comm and began moving toward the crater. His enhanced exoskeleton made barely a whisper as he crossed the broken ground, stepping carefully over debris and keeping his rifle ready. The Vorthak were known for playing dead, and he'd learned the hard way not to trust a still body on a battlefield. As he approached the crater's edge, he heard something that made him freeze. It was faint, barely audible over the distant sounds of combat, but unmistakable. Someone was crying. Not the harsh growls of a wounded Vorthak or the chittering of an injured Zalani. This sounded almost human. Marcus dropped to one knee and activated his suit's enhanced optics. The crater was deep, maybe 10 meters across, carved out by what looked like a concentrated plasma bombardment. At the bottom, partially buried under debris, he could see movement. A figure in what appeared to be damaged ceremonial robes was trying to free itself from under a piece of twisted metal. The figure looked up, and Marcus felt his breath catch. Even through his suit's sensors, he could see the being's features clearly. She was humanoid, but definitely not human. Her skin had a pale golden hue that seemed to shimmer slightly in the harsh battlefield lighting. Her hair was long and dark, but seemed to have threads of silver running through it that moved independently. Most striking were her eyes, large, intelligent, and a deep violet color that seemed to hold flecks of starlight. Marcus had seen a lot of alien species during his time with the Council forces, but nothing quite like this. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, but, more importantly, she was clearly in pain and needed help. Hey, Marcus called out softly, not wanting to startle her. Can you understand me? The being looked up at him with those remarkable eyes. When she spoke, her voice was melodic despite the obvious pain. You are human? That's right. I'm going to get you out of there. Can you move your legs? She tried to shift position and winced. I think, yes, but this metal is too heavy. Marcus slung his rifle and began climbing down into the crater. His suit's proximity sensors showed no immediate threats, but he kept alert anyway. As he got closer, he could see the being more clearly. She was smaller than him, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with elegant features that spoke of nobility or high birth. Her robes, though damaged, were made of some kind of material that seemed to shift colors in the light. What's your name? Marcus asked as he examined the piece of debris pinning her legs. I am. She hesitated for a moment. You may call me Lyra. Marcus nodded and got his hands under the twisted metal beam. It was heavy, probably close to 300 pounds, but his exoskeleton's power assist made it manageable. On 3, I want you to pull your legs free. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Marcus heaved upward, his suit's servos whining with effort. Lyra quickly pulled herself free, gasping with relief. As soon as she was clear, Marcus let the beam fall back into place with a resounding crash. Can you stand? He asked, offering her his hand. Lyra accepted his help and got to her feet, though she favored her left leg. I think so. Thank you, human. You risked much to help someone you do not know. Marcus, he said. My name is Marcus. And helping people is what we do. A smile crossed Lyra's features. What you do? All humans. Well, it's what we're supposed to do. Sometimes we don't live up to it, but we try. Marcus's proximity sensors suddenly flashed red. 3 Vorthak warriors were approaching the crater's edge, their weapon signatures hot on his display. Without hesitation, he pushed Lyra behind a large piece of debris and brought his rifle up. Stay down, he whispered. The first Vorthak appeared at the crater's rim, a massive reptilian humanoid covered in natural armor plating. Its weapon was some kind of energy cannon that could probably punch through Marcus's suit without much trouble. The creature's yellow eyes scanned the crater methodically. Marcus waited until all 3 were visible, then opened fire. His pulse rifle sent rapid bursts of coherent energy that struck the first Vorthak center mass, sending it tumbling backward. The other 2 immediately returned fire, their energy blasts superheating the air around Marcus's position. Rolling to new cover, Marcus kept firing. Human weapons technology wasn't as advanced as some species, but humans had a talent for making their equipment reliable and effective. His pulse rifle cycled smoothly as he put precise shots into his targets, using his superior mobility to stay ahead of their slower, more powerful weapons. The second Vorthak went down hard, its armor smoking from multiple hits. The third one tried to retreat, but Marcus put a final burst into its back as it fled. In less than 30 seconds, the immediate threat was neutralized. Is it over? Lyra asked from behind her cover. For now, Marcus replied, reloading his weapon. But we need to move. Where were you heading before the attack? Lyra hesitated again. I was traveling with a diplomatic convoy. We were bound for the Centauri station to attend an important conference. Marcus checked his suit's navigation systems. Centauri station was about 40 kilometers away through hostile territory. Not an easy journey, especially with wounded civilians. That's a long way through Vorthak-controlled space, he said. What was so important about this conference? Trade negotiations, Lyra said quickly. Very important for my people's future. Something about her answer felt incomplete, but Marcus didn't push. Everyone had secrets in wartime, and whatever Lyra wasn't telling him probably wasn't his business anyway. Marcus, his calm crackled to life. Where the hell are you? We're moving to extract in 10 minutes. Marcus looked at Lyra, who was watching him with those remarkable eyes. He could easily rejoin his unit and leave her to make her own way. It would be the militarily sound decision. But humans didn't always make the militarily sound decision. Change of plans, command. Marcus said into his comm, I've got a civilian casualty who needs escort to Centauri Station. Negative, Marine. Mission parameters don't include babysitting alien refugees. Then, I guess I'm off mission, Marcus replied, and switched off his comm again. Lyra stared at him in apparent amazement. You would disobey orders for a stranger? Wouldn't be the first time, Marcus said with a grin. Besides, humans have a saying, leave no one behind. Even when that someone is not human. Marcus shouldered his rifle and helped Lyra climb out of the crater. Especially then. As they made their way across the battlefield, Lyra moved with surprising grace despite her injured leg. She seemed to have an instinctive sense for cover and concealment, staying low when Marcus signaled, and moving quietly despite her ornate robes. You move well for a diplomat, Marcus observed. My people believe in being prepared for various situations, Lyra replied diplomatically. They had covered about 2 kilometers when Marcus's sensors picked up movement ahead. A Vorthak patrol, 6 strong, was moving through a narrow valley that blocked their most direct route to Centauri Station. Marcus gestured for Lyra to take cover behind a rock formation and studied the situation. We can go around, he said quietly. Add maybe 5 kilometers to our journey. Or, Lyra asked, or I can take them out. But, that's loud, and loud brings attention we don't want. Lyra was quiet for a moment, studying the patrol through the gap in the rocks. What if there was another way? Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Lyra stood up and began walking toward the patrol. Marcus cursed and started to follow, but she held up a hand to stop him. Stay hidden, she whispered. Trust me. Marcus watched in amazement as Lyra approached the Vorthak patrol. She moved differently now, with a regal bearing that seemed to command attention. When the patrol leader spotted her, Instead of immediately attacking, it stopped and seemed to listen as she spoke. Marcus couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see the body language. The Vorthack leader was clearly agitated, gesturing with its weapon. Lyra remained calm, speaking in measured tones. After several minutes, the entire patrol simply turned and walked away, leaving the valley clear. Lyra returned to Marcus's hiding spot with a small smile on her face. "How did you do that?" Marcus asked, genuinely impressed. "Diplomacy," Lyra said simply. "I told them we were traveling under protection of the Neutral Commerce Accords, and that harming us would bring retaliation from the Merchant Guild. And they just believed you? I can be very convincing when necessary." As they continued their journey, Marcus found himself increasingly curious about his mysterious companion. She clearly wasn't just a simple diplomat. Her knowledge of battlefield tactics, her ability to negotiate with hostile forces, and the way she carried herself all suggested someone with significant experience in dangerous situations. The terrain became more difficult as they moved deeper into the contested zone. Vorthack forces had been through this area extensively, leaving behind minefields, automated defense systems, and other hazards. Marcus's suit could detect most threats, but some of the alien technology was specifically designed to fool human sensors. It was Lyra who spotted the gravitic mine hidden among a cluster of innocent-looking rocks. Her enhanced vision caught the slight distortion in the air around it that Marcus's equipment had missed entirely. "Stop," she said suddenly, grabbing his arm. "There." Marcus followed her gaze and saw the nearly invisible shimmer. His suit's sensors, now that he knew where to look, confirmed the presence of an explosive device powerful enough to vaporize both of them. "Good eyes," he said with genuine admiration. "My people have always been good at seeing things others miss," Lyra replied. They carefully worked their way around the minefield, with Lyra spotting several more hidden dangers that Marcus's technology couldn't detect. It was becoming clear that whatever species Lyra belonged to, they had capabilities that complemented human technology in useful ways. Night was falling by the time they reached the halfway point to Centauri Station. Marcus's suit showed his power reserves were still good, but Lyra was clearly exhausted. They found shelter in an abandoned mining facility that had been hastily evacuated when the war reached this sector. "We should rest here for a few hours," Marcus said, checking the building's structural integrity. "My suit can keep watch while we sleep." "You would be that trusting?" Lyra asked. Marcus looked at her in the dim light filtering through broken windows. Despite everything they'd been through, she still maintained that otherworldly beauty that had struck him when he first saw her in the crater. But, more than that, she'd proven herself to be intelligent, capable, and trustworthy. "Yeah," he said simply. "I trust you." Something shifted in Lyra's expression at those words. For a moment, her composed diplomatic mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. "Marcus," she said quietly, "there are things about me you do not know. Things that might change how you feel." "We all have secrets," Marcus replied. "What matters is who you choose to be when it counts." Lyra was quiet for a long time, staring out at the dark landscape beyond the facility. Finally, she spoke again. "My people have a saying. The measure of a person is not in their birth, but in their choices. I begin to understand why humans have such a reputation throughout the galaxy." "What kind of reputation?" Marcus asked, curious. "Stubborn, unpredictable, willing to fight against impossible odds." She paused. "And loyal to a fault." Marcus smiled. "Sounds about right." As they settled in to rest, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what secrets Lyra was hiding. But looking at her now, tired but determined, graceful even in these rough conditions, he found he didn't really care. Whatever her story was, she was here now, and they were in this together. The night passed quietly, broken only by distant sounds of combat from other sectors. When dawn came, they prepared to continue their journey towards Centauri Station, unaware that their arrival would set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But that was still ahead of them. For now, there was only the journey, and two unlikely companions learning to trust each other against impossible odds. Marcus had rescued a stranger from a battlefield, never imagining that this simple act of human decency would connect him to forces far greater than he could possibly understand. The approach to Centauri Station revealed the scope of the conflict that had torn through this sector. What should have been a bustling trade hub with dozens of ships coming and going was now a fortress surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol vessels. Marcus counted at least 3 different military fleets maintaining an uneasy ceasefire in the area: Galactic Council forces, independent merchant marine vessels, and even a few ships he couldn't immediately identify. It appears the situation has become more complicated since I was last here, Lyra observed, studying the tactical display on Marcus's suit interface. When was that? Marcus asked. Some time ago, Lyra replied evasively. Marcus was beginning to recognize that pattern in her responses. Every time he asked something that might reveal details about her background, she deflected with diplomatic non-answers. Not that he could blame her. In his experience, people who traveled with diplomatic convoys and could negotiate with hostile aliens usually had good reasons for keeping their personal information private. We're going to need clearance to approach, Marcus said, activating his suit's communications array. Station control. This is Terran Marine Sergeant Marcus Chun, requesting permission to approach with 1 civilian passenger. The response came back almost immediately. Sergeant Chun, your unit is listed as MIA. Please transmit authentication codes and state your mission status. Marcus provided his codes and briefly explained the rescue mission. There was a long pause before station control responded. Authentication confirmed. You're cleared for approach, but be advised that station security will need to process both you and your passenger upon arrival. Docket Bay 7. As they approached the station, Marcus noticed Lyra becoming increasingly tense. Her graceful composure remained intact, but he could see the subtle signs of nervousness in the way she adjusted her robes and checked her reflection in the small mirror built into his suit's emergency kit. You okay? He asked. I am preparing myself for what comes next, she replied. Docking Bay 7 was surprisingly busy for a station under military lockdown. Marcus could see beings from at least a dozen different species moving through the area, some in military uniforms, others in civilian dress, and a few in the elaborate formal where that usually indicated diplomatic or noble status. As they disembarked from Marcus's emergency shuttle, a station security team approached. The leader was a tall, blue-skinned Centaurian wearing the insignia of a security chief. Sergeant Chun, I am Chief Administrator Vextar, the alien said in accented but clear standard. We need to process your passenger through standard refugee protocols. I understand, Marcus replied. Lyra here was traveling with a diplomatic convoy that got hit by Vorthak raiders. Vextar looked at Lyra with professional interest, but Marcus noticed something change in the alien's expression as he studied her features more closely. The security chief's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and he straightened to a more formal posture. Miss? Lyra, you said. Vextar's voice had taken on a noticeably more respectful tone. That is correct, Lyra replied smoothly. Of course. If you would both please follow me to the administrative offices, we can complete the necessary paperwork quickly. As they walked through the station's corridors, Marcus began to notice something odd. Other beings they passed seemed to recognize Lyra. It was subtle, a brief pause, a second look, a slight bow of the head, but unmistakable. A group of Altarian merchants actually stopped their conversation entirely when she passed. Popular lady, Marcus murmured. I have what you might call a recognizable face, Lyra replied. The administrative offices were on the station's upper levels, accessible only through security checkpoints and identification scanners. As they rode the lift upward, Marcus's suit detected increasing levels of sophisticated scanning equipment. Someone was taking Lyra's processing very seriously indeed. Chief Administrator, Marcus said as they walked down a richly appointed corridor. Is all this standard procedure for refugee processing? For special cases, yes, Vextar replied carefully. Miss Lyra's situation requires certain protocols. They were ushered into a spacious office overlooking the station's central hub. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see the controlled chaos of a major space station operating under wartime conditions. But his attention was quickly drawn to the office's occupants. 3 beings sat behind an ornate desk that looked more appropriate for a government building than a space station. In the center was a figure Marcus recognized from news broadcasts, Admiral Krelvex of the Galactic Council Defense Force. To his left sat an elderly human woman in expensive civilian clothes, and to his right was someone Marcus had never seen before but who radiated an aura of authority that made him instinctively stand straighter. Sergeant Chun, Admiral Krelvex said, rising from his seat. Your rescue of our guest has not gone unnoticed. Please, both of you sit. Marcus remained standing. With respect, Admiral, I'd like to know what's going on here. Standard refugee processing doesn't usually involve flag officers. Quite right, Sergeant. And you deserve an explanation. The Admiral gestured to Lyra. Your passenger is not exactly a refugee. Marcus turned to look at Lyra, who had remained silent since entering the office. She met his gaze with those remarkable violet eyes, and he could see something like regret in them. I told you there were things about me you did not know, she said quietly. Miss Lyra, the elderly human woman spoke for the first time. Or should I say, Your Highness? Marcus felt the world shift around him. Your Highness. Marcus, Lyra said, standing and turning to face him fully. As she did, something subtle changed about her posture, her bearing, the way she held herself. The diplomatic composure he'd noticed before became something more. Genuine nobility, unmistakable authority, the presence of someone born to rule. I am Lyrilii Estrina Morthana, Crown Princess of the Threnodai Empire. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus stared at Lyra, Princess Lyrilii, as his mind processed this information. The Threnodai Empire was one of the most powerful political entities in the galaxy, controlling trade routes that spanned dozens of systems. Their royal family was legendarily reclusive, rarely appearing in public, and never traveling without massive security details. Marcus started, then stopped. The convoy you were traveling with was a secret diplomatic mission, Admiral Krelvex confirmed. Her Highness was traveling incognito to attend crucial peace negotiations. The Vorthak attack was specifically targeted to prevent those negotiations from taking place. Marcus sat down heavily. So when I rescued you from that crater, you rescued the future queen of one of the galaxy's most influential empires. The unknown third figure spoke for the first time. His voice carried authority that made even the Admiral defer to him. I am Lord Chancellor Thaxmore, advisor to the Threnodai Royal Court. Sergeant Chun, your actions have quite literally changed the course of galactic history. I just helped someone who needed help, Marcus said, still struggling to process the situation. Yes, Princess Lyrilii said, and her voice carried a warmth that cut through all the formal titles and political implications. You did. Without thought for reward or recognition, you risked your life to save a stranger. That is not a common thing in my experience. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. The golden skin that shimmered with an inner light, the silver threads in her hair that moved independently, the eyes that held flecks of starlight. Now that he knew what to look for, he could see the subtle signs of her royal heritage. The Threnodai were said to be descended from an ancient civilization that had mastered both technology and what humans might call magic. Their royal bloodlines carried genetic modifications that made them appear almost ethereal. The diplomatic mission, Marcus said, his tactical mind starting to work through the implications. What were you negotiating? A comprehensive peace treaty, the elderly human woman answered. I'm Ambassador Sarah Chun, by the way. Terran Diplomatic Corps. Marcus started. Chun? Are we? Distant cousins, possibly. The galaxy is smaller than it seems sometimes. Ambassador Chun smiled briefly, then turned serious again. Princess Lyrilii was carrying the Threnodai Empire's final terms for ending the conflict with the Vorthak Confederation. Without her presence at the negotiations, the peace talks have stalled. But I'm here now, Princess Lyrilii said firmly. The negotiations can proceed. It's not that simple, Your Highness, Lord Chancellor Thaxmore replied. The Vorthak have declared that the attack on your convoy was justifiable under their code of military honor. They claim that traveling without proper diplomatic immunity was a provocation. That's ridiculous, Marcus said. She was clearly on a diplomatic mission. Under human law, yes, Admiral Krelvex agreed. But Vorthak military doctrine recognizes only formally declared diplomatic channels. Since the princess was traveling incognito, They can claim it was a legitimate military target. Marcus finished, understanding the political trap. So what happens now? Now, Princess Lorelei said, and her voice carried the steel of royal authority. We find another way to make peace. The alternative is a war that could consume half the galaxy. Over the next several hours, Marcus found himself in the surreal position of sitting in on high-level diplomatic discussions between some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. His military experience gave him insights into the tactical situation that the diplomats found valuable, but, more importantly, his human perspective offered solutions that the other species hadn't considered. The problem, Ambassador Chen explained, is that Vorthack honor culture requires them to acknowledge a mistake before they can make amends. But, acknowledging that attacking the princess was wrong would be seen as a sign of weakness by their military caste. So they need a face-saving way to back down, Marcus said. What if they weren't backing down? What if they were moving forward toward something better? Explain, Lord Chancellor Thaxmore prompted. Marcus stood and moved to the tactical display showing the current positions of various military forces. The Vorthack attacked the convoy because they thought it was a legitimate target. But what if that attack actually accomplished something positive from their perspective? I'm not following, Admiral Krelvex said. The attack brought together a Threnodai princess and a human marine, Marcus explained. Two species that have never had much contact before. What if that meeting led to a new kind of alliance? Something that benefits the Vorthack more than continued warfare. Princess Lorelei was studying Marcus with intense interest. You're suggesting we frame my rescue not as a failure of their intelligence, but as an unintended catalyst for broader cooperation? Exactly. Humans are good at finding opportunities in disasters. Maybe that's something we can offer the other species in the galaxy. The room fell silent as the implications of Marcus's suggestion sank in. Ambassador Chun was the first to speak. A three-way alliance. Humans, Threnodai, and Vorthack. It would fundamentally reshape galactic politics. It would require the princess to remain involved in the negotiations, Lord Chancellor Thaxmore noted. Your Highness, your father will not approve of extended exposure to potentially dangerous situations. My father will approve of preventing a galactic war. Princess Lorelei replied firmly. Besides, I will not be unprotected. She turned to look at Marcus. Sergeant Chun has already demonstrated his ability to keep me safe under the most difficult circumstances. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Ma'am, I'm just a Marine. I'm not qualified to provide security for royalty. You are qualified to keep me alive, the princess replied. Which is more important than ceremony or protocol. The princess raises an interesting point, Admiral Krelvex mused. Human military doctrine has proven remarkably effective in this conflict. Having a human military advisor might actually strengthen her position in the negotiations. I have responsibilities to my unit, Marcus protested. Your unit has been transferred to Special Diplomatic Security Detail, Admiral Krelvex said with a slight smile. Effective immediately. Congratulations on your promotion to lieutenant, by the way. Marcus looked around the room at the expectant faces. Somehow, his simple act of helping someone in need had snowballed into a situation where he was being asked to reshape galactic politics while protecting the most important person he'd ever met. Can I ask a question? Marcus said finally. Of course, Princess Lorelei replied. When this is all over, when the peace treaty is signed and the war is ended, what happens then? The princess was quiet for a long moment. Then, we return to our respective worlds and our respective duties. The alliance we build must be stronger than any individual connection. Marcus nodded, understanding the implication. Whatever was developing between them, and he was beginning to realize there was something developing, would have to be secondary to the larger political picture. In that case, Marcus said, I guess we'd better make sure we build something worth the sacrifice. Princess Lorelei smiled, and for a moment she looked less like galactic royalty and more like the woman he'd pulled from a crater on a distant battlefield. I would expect nothing less from the human who taught me what true courage looks like. As the meeting broke up and preparations began for the complex negotiations ahead, Marcus reflected on how quickly his life had changed. 2 days ago, he'd been a simple Marine following orders. Now he was a diplomatic bodyguard responsible for protecting the future queen of a galactic empire while helping to forge an alliance that could prevent interstellar war. But, looking at Princess Lyrelii as she reviewed diplomatic documents with fierce concentration, Marcus realized that the most difficult part wouldn't be the politics or the danger. The hardest part would be learning to separate his growing feelings for the woman he'd rescued from his duty to protect the princess she truly was. Because those roles, he was beginning to understand, might ultimately be incompatible. The Vorthak delegation arrived at Centauri Station 3 days later aboard a massive warship that dwarfed every other vessel in the area. Marcus watched from the station's observation deck as the ship maneuvered into position, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could reduce the station to debris in minutes. "Impressive," Princess Lyrelii said, joining him at the window. "They certainly know how to make an entrance." "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked. It still felt strange addressing someone of her rank so casually, but she'd insisted on maintaining the informal relationship they'd developed during their journey. "Terrified," she replied honestly. "But not of the Vorthak. I'm afraid of failing my people. This is our best chance for peace, perhaps our only chance. If I cannot make them see the value of cooperation over conquest." "You will," Marcus said with quiet confidence. "You've already proven you can negotiate with them. The trick now is making them want what we're offering more than they want to keep fighting." The princess smiled at his use of "we." Over the past 3 days, they'd worked closely together to develop the negotiation strategy, and Marcus had been impressed by her intelligence and political instincts. She thought several moves ahead, considering not just immediate consequences, but long-term implications of every decision. It was like watching a master chess player, if chess were played with the lives of billions of beings. "The advance team is here," Ambassador Chen announced, entering the observation deck. "They want to inspect the security arrangements before the main delegation boards the station." Marcus straightened his new uniform. The promotion to lieutenant had come with new responsibilities he was still learning to navigate. Officially, he was Princess Lyrelii's military liaison. Unofficially, he was her bodyguard, advisor, and, increasingly, her friend. It was a complex relationship made more complicated by the growing attraction he felt for her, an attraction that was absolutely inappropriate given their respective positions. The Vorthak advance team consisted of 6 warriors in full battle armor, led by a massive individual whose scarred hide spoke of countless battles. They moved through the station with the confident stride of apex predators, and Marcus could see station personnel, giving them a wide berth. "War leader Korthe K." Princess Lyrelii said formally as the group approached. "Welcome to Centauri Station. I am Princess Lyrelii of the Threnodai Empire." The huge Vorthak studied her with yellow eyes that missed nothing. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the station's bulkheads. "Princess, you are smaller than expected. Size is not always an indicator of capability," she replied smoothly, "as I believe your recent encounters with human forces have demonstrated." Marcus tensed slightly at the veiled reference to human military successes against Vorthak forces, but war leader Korthike actually seemed amused. "Truth. These humans fight with cunning and courage despite their physical limitations." His gaze fixed on Marcus. "You are the warrior who extracted the princess from our battlefield." "I am," Marcus replied simply. "You fought through my warriors to reach her?" "Yes." "Good. A princess who travels with weak protectors is not worth negotiating with." Kortheke's attention returned to Princess Lyrelii. "The hegemon will arrive within the hour. He will want to speak with you immediately." "Of course," the princess replied. "I look forward to our discussions." After the Vorthak departed, Ambassador Chen shook her head in amazement. "In 40 years of diplomatic service, I've never seen anyone handle a Vorthak inspection with such composure. They respect strength, and you just showed them exactly the kind of strength they understand." "I had a good teacher," Princess Lyrelii said, glancing at Marcus. "Humans have an interesting approach to demonstrating capability." The main Vorthak delegation arrived precisely on schedule. The station's docking bay had been reconfigured to accommodate their massive shuttle, and Marcus couldn't help but be impressed by the engineering involved. Everything about Vorthak technology emphasized power and durability over elegance. Hegeman Graxthor was even larger than war leader Korthake, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with ceremonial scars covering his arms and shoulders. His armor was ornate but clearly functional, decorated with trophies that Marcus realized were probably taken from defeated enemies. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Princess," he said, inclining his massive head slightly, "I greet you in the name of the Vorthak Confederation. Your presence here is unexpected, as was your attack on my convoy, Hegeman," she replied calmly. "But perhaps unexpected events can lead to unexpected opportunities." Marcus watched the exchange carefully, noting the subtle body language of both participants. The hegemon was testing the princess, probing for weakness or inexperience. But Princess Lyralii met his gaze steadily, showing neither deference nor defiance, simply the confidence of someone who knew her own worth. "Indeed," Hegemon Graxthor replied after a moment. "Shall we begin?" The negotiation chamber had been arranged to accommodate the physical and cultural needs of all 3 species involved. The Vorthak delegation sat on one side, their massive frames requiring specially reinforced furniture. The human and Threnodai representatives sat opposite them, with translation equipment and recording devices arrayed between the groups. "Before we begin formal discussions," Princess Lyralii said, "I want to address the circumstances that brought us here. Your forces attacked my convoy believing it to be a legitimate military target. Under the circumstances, that attack was understandable from your perspective." Marcus could see the surprise on several Vorthak faces. They'd clearly expected accusations and demands for reparations. However, the princess continued, that attack inadvertently created an opportunity that might not have existed otherwise. Lieutenant Chin's rescue of me led to extended contact between our species. Contact that has revealed possibilities none of us had previously considered. "Explain these possibilities," Hegemon Graxthor commanded. "The humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention." Their species excels at finding solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The Threnodai Empire has resources and technology that could benefit all parties. The Vorthak Confederation has military strength and territorial control that makes you a natural protector of trade routes. Princess Lyralii leaned forward slightly. "Separately, we are 3 powers in conflict. Together, we could reshape the galaxy." War leader Korthake spoke up. "You propose alliance?" "The Confederation has never shared power with lesser species." "I propose partnership between equals," the princess corrected. "Each species contributing their unique strengths to collective benefit." Marcus watched the Vorthak delegation carefully. He could see the internal conflict in their expressions, the appeal of the proposed alliance warring with their cultural pride and suspicion of outsiders. "What specific benefits do you offer?" Hegemon Graxthor asked. "Technology transfer," Ambassador Chen answered. "Human military innovations adapted for Vorthak use. Threnodai manufacturing techniques that could improve your ship construction. Joint exploration of uncharted systems. And in return, protection of established trade routes," Princess Lyralii replied. "Access to Vorthak-controlled territories for commercial development. Shared intelligence about threats to galactic stability." The negotiations continued for hours, with each side probing the other's positions and testing the limits of possible compromise. Marcus found himself speaking up several times, offering the human perspective on military cooperation and resource sharing. He noticed that the Vorthak seemed to respect his input more when he spoke from personal experience rather than abstract theory. During a break in the formal discussions, war leader Korthake approached Marcus privately. "Human," the massive warrior said, "I have a question that is not for the negotiation table." "What is it? Why did you risk yourself for the princess?" "She was a stranger, not of your species or your allegiance." Marcus considered the question seriously. "Because it was the right thing to do." That is not an answer. Many things are right that warriors do not do because they are dangerous or inconvenient. "Then, because I couldn't live with myself if I'd walked away," Marcus replied. "Humans have a concept called honor that doesn't depend on codes or traditions. It comes from inside, from knowing who you choose to be when no one is watching." Korthake was quiet for a long moment. "This is why the Confederation has struggled against your forces. We understand honor based on tradition and law, but honor that comes from within, that is a different kind of strength. It's the kind of strength that makes partnerships possible, Marcus said, because it means you can trust someone to do the right thing even when it costs them something. When negotiations resumed, Marcus noticed a subtle shift in the Vorthack delegation's attitude. They seemed more willing to consider proposals that required mutual trust and long-term cooperation. There is one matter that requires special consideration, Hegeman Graxthor announced as the session neared its end. The princess was traveling without formal diplomatic protection. Under our laws, this made the attack on her convoy legitimate. However, the result of that attack has proven beneficial to all parties. Marcus could see where this was going. The hegemon needed a way to acknowledge the error without admitting wrongdoing. What do you propose? Princess Lyralii asked. A new category of protection. Individuals who serve as bridges between our species should be granted special status, protected not by traditional diplomatic immunity, but by the collective honor of the alliance itself. An interesting concept, the princess replied thoughtfully. Such protections would need to be earned through demonstrated commitment to mutual benefit. Agreed. And the first to receive such status should be those whose actions created the possibility of alliance. The hegemon's gaze fixed on Marcus. Lieutenant Shun, would you accept such designation? Marcus felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. If it serves the cause of peace, yes. Then, let it be recorded, Princess Lyralii said formally. Lieutenant Marcus Chun of Earth is hereby designated the first Keeper of Alliance, under the joint protection of the Threnodai Empire, the Vorthack Confederation, and the Terran Republic. The ceremony was brief, but solemn. Marcus knelt as Princess Lyralii spoke words in ancient Threnodai, while Hegemon Graxthor responded in the guttural language of the Vorthack. When it was finished, Marcus wore a small pendant that identified him as something unique in galactic history, a being whose protection was guaranteed by treaty between former enemies. As the Vorthack delegation prepared to depart, war leader Korthe K approached Marcus one final time. Keeper of Alliance, he said formally. The Confederation will honor your status. But, more than that, we will remember the lesson you taught us about choosing to do right when it costs something. After the Vorthack departed, the negotiation team gathered for a debriefing. The preliminary agreement reached would need ratification by all three governments, but the framework for lasting peace had been established. Remarkable work, Your Highness, Ambassador Chen said. I've never seen such a complex negotiation resolved so smoothly. The credit belongs to all of us, Princess Lyralii replied. Especially our Keeper of Alliance, whose example made cooperation possible. Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what needed to be done. Yes, the princess said quietly. That is exactly what you did. And that is why this alliance will work. Because it's built on people choosing to do what's right, not what's easy. As the station began returning to normal operations, Marcus found himself alone with Princess Lyralii in the observation deck where they'd watched the Vorthack arrive. So what happens now, he asked. Now we return to our respective worlds to seek ratification of the treaty, she replied. The formal ceremonies will take place on Threnodos's Prime, the Vorthack homeworld, and Earth. And after that, Princess Lyralii was quiet for a long time, looking out at the stars beyond the station. After that, I become queen of the Threnodai Empire, and you become the first human to hold a permanent position in the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. Marcus understood the implication. Their working relationship would continue, but the personal connection they developed would have to be carefully managed. A queen could not have the same kind of friendship with her bodyguard that a princess might. I want you to know, she said softly, not looking at him, that these past days have been among the most meaningful of my life. Not because of the political achievement, but because I learned what it means to have someone choose to protect you not out of duty or obligation, but because they believe you're worth protecting. Lyra, Marcus started, using her preferred name without thinking. Don't, she interrupted gently. Please, we both know what this is, and we both know why it can't be anything more. But that doesn't make it less real or less valuable. Marcus nodded, understanding. The alliance is bigger than any of us. Yes, but it exists because of people like you, who choose to do the right thing even when it costs them something. As they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the ships of three formerly hostile species sharing the same space peacefully, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had brought him to this moment. A simple rescue mission had become something much larger, reshaping not just his own life, but the balance of power in the galaxy. Tomorrow they would part ways, she to return to her empire and the crown that awaited her, he to begin his new role as humanity's representative in the alliance they'd forged. But tonight, they were just two people who'd found something precious in the midst of war and chosen to transform it into something that could benefit the entire galaxy. It wasn't the ending either of them might have wanted, but it was the right ending, and Marcus was beginning to understand that sometimes doing the right thing was more important than getting what you wanted. 3 months after the signing of the Tripartite Alliance Treaty, Lieutenant Marcus Chin stood in the ceremonial gardens of the Threnodai Royal Palace, watching beings from dozens of species mingle in celebration of the galaxy's first truly inclusive peace accord. The gardens were a marvel of bioengineering, with plants from hundreds of worlds creating a symphony of colors and scents that no single planet could have produced. Marcus wore the formal uniform of a Keeper of Alliance, a position that had evolved far beyond what anyone had originally envisioned. As the first holder of the title, he'd found himself defining its responsibilities through practical experience rather than established protocol. He served as mediator, translator, and sometimes protector as the three species learned to work together. "You look thoughtful," Ambassador Chin said, joining him near a fountain that generated music as well as water. "Not enjoying the party, just processing," Marcus replied. "6 months ago, I was a grunt marine taking orders. Now I'm rubbing elbows with galactic royalty and trying to prevent interspecies incidents at diplomatic receptions. Culture shock, something like that." Marcus gestured toward where a group of Vorthak warriors were engaged in animated conversation with Threnodai nobles. "Though I have to admit, it's working better than anyone predicted." The alliance had indeed exceeded all expectations. Trade routes that had been battlefields just months before were now bustling with commercial traffic under Vorthak protection. Human technical innovations were being combined with Threnodai manufacturing capabilities to produce everything from more efficient starship engines to medical equipment that could treat any known species. Most remarkably, former enemies were beginning to develop genuine friendships. "Speaking of culture shock," Ambassador Chun said with a slight smile, "you might want to prepare yourself. Her Majesty specifically requested your presence at the coronation ceremony tomorrow." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Princess Lyralii had been crowned queen of the Threnodai Empire 2 weeks earlier, in a ceremony he'd watched via broadcast from his diplomatic posting on Vorthak Prime. Seeing her transformed from the woman he'd rescued into the regal figure accepting the crystal crown had been one of the most difficult experiences of his life. "Any particular reason?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "She wants to formally recognize your role in creating the alliance. Apparently, there's going to be some kind of special presentation." Marcus nodded, though privately he wondered if he was ready to see Lyralii again. Their communication since the treaty signing had been strictly professional. Updates on alliance matters, requests for consultation on policy questions, formal acknowledgments of completed tasks. The warm, personal connection they developed during their journey to Centauri Station had been carefully buried beneath layers of protocol and duty. "Marcus," a familiar voice called out in accented standard. War leader Korthake approached through the crowd, his ceremonial armor glinting in the garden's bioluminescent lighting. Despite his imposing size, other guests moved aside respectfully rather than fearfully, a change that spoke volumes about how the alliance had shifted galactic perspectives. "Korthake," Marcus replied warmly. "How are you enjoying Threnodai hospitality?" "Their food lacks proper seasoning." The massive Vorthak replied with what Marcus had learned to recognize as his version of humor. "But their engineers know their craft. The new fusion cores your species designed work magnificently in our heavy cruisers." "Glad to hear it. Any problems with the integration?" "None, though some of my warriors still struggle with human concepts of safety margins and redundant systems." Korthake's expression grew more serious. "I wanted to thank you, Keeper. This alliance has given my people something we had not known for generations." "What's that?" "Hope. For centuries, The Confederation has measured success only in territory conquered and enemies defeated. But this partnership shows us that there are other kinds of victory. Building rather than destroying. Creating rather than consuming. Marcus was touched by the warrior's sincerity. That's the whole idea behind the alliance. Finding ways for everyone to benefit. Indeed. Which is why tomorrow's ceremony is so important. What the Queen intends to announce will strengthen the bonds between our peoples even further. Before Marcus could ask what Korthike meant, a gentle chime sounded throughout the gardens. The crowd began moving toward the palace's great hall for the formal dinner, and Marcus found himself swept along in the flow of dignitaries and officials. The great hall was magnificent, its crystal walls displaying images of all three homeworlds, while its acoustic systems carried perfect translations of conversations in dozens of languages. Marcus found his assigned seat at the high table, between a Threnodai trade minister and a human admiral he'd worked with during the integration of Terran technology into Alliance fleet operations. Queen Lyralii entered last, as protocol demanded. Marcus felt his breath catch as he saw her. She wore traditional Threnodai formal dress, a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, flowing and shifting with each movement. The crystal crown rested on her head, its faceted surface reflecting the hall's lights and patterns that seemed almost alive. But it was her bearing that truly marked her transformation. She moved with absolute confidence, every gesture perfectly calculated to project royal authority. Yet when her eyes found his across the crowded hall, Marcus saw a flicker of the woman he'd pulled from a battlefield crater. Just for an instant, her formal mask slipped to reveal genuine warmth and something that might have been longing. The dinner proceeded with the elaborate rituals expected at such gatherings. Speeches were given in multiple languages, toasts were raised to peace and prosperity, and ancient ceremonies were observed that formally welcomed new members into the galactic community. During the fourth course, Queen Lyralii rose to address the assembly. Friends, allies, fellow beings, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's enhanced acoustics. 6 months ago, we stood on the brink of a war that could have consumed half the galaxy. Tonight, we celebrate not just peace, but partnership. We have learned that our differences in biology, culture, and philosophy are not barriers to overcome, but strengths to be combined. Applause filled the hall, but the Queen raised her hand for silence. This transformation did not happen through grand gestures or elaborate negotiations, though both had their place. It happened because individuals chose to act with courage and compassion when such actions required personal sacrifice. Her gaze found Marcus again. Tomorrow, I will formally recognize one such individual whose simple act of human decency changed the course of galactic history. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks as hundreds of beings turned to look at him. He'd never been comfortable with public recognition, preferring to let his work speak for itself. After dinner, as guests mingled in smaller groups throughout the palace, Marcus stepped out onto a private balcony to get some air and collect his thoughts. The night sky above Threnodos's prime was spectacular, with 3 moons casting shifting patterns of light across the landscape below. Overwhelmed, a familiar voice asked behind him. Marcus turned to find Queen Lyralii approaching, having somehow slipped away from her royal duties. She'd removed the crystal crown, and her hair fell naturally around her shoulders, making her look more like the woman he remembered. A little, he admitted. I keep expecting to wake up and find myself back in my barracks, getting ready for another routine patrol. Do you regret it? The path your life has taken? Marcus considered the question seriously. No. Even with all the complications and responsibilities, I can't regret helping create something that's prevented so much suffering. And the personal costs. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw that she was really asking about them, about what they'd given up for the greater good. Some things are worth the sacrifice, he said quietly. Queen Lyralii moved to stand beside him at the balcony's edge. I wanted to speak with you privately before tomorrow's ceremony. What I'm going to announce will change your life again, perhaps as dramatically as our first meeting did. What do you mean? The alliance we've built is still fragile. It needs constant tending, careful nurturing. The Keeper of Alliance position was created as a temporary expedient, but It's proven so valuable that the three governments want to make it permanent. She paused, studying his face. They want to expand it into a full diplomatic corps, with you as its director. Marcus felt the weight of implications settling on him. That would mean a permanent posting here on Threnodos's Prime, regular travel between the three homeworlds, responsibility for training the next generation of Alliance diplomats. She smiled slightly. In effect, you'd become the galaxy's expert on interspecies cooperation. That's a big responsibility. You've already proven you can handle it. The question is whether you want to. Marcus looked out at the alien landscape, thinking about everything that had brought him to this moment. A year ago, he'd been a simple soldier following orders. Now he was being offered the chance to help shape the future of galactic civilization. There's something else, Queen Lyralii continued. Something personal I need to tell you. She was quiet for so long that Marcus began to wonder if she'd changed her mind about speaking. When she finally continued, her voice was barely above a whisper. These months apart have taught me something important. I thought that my duty to my people required me to sacrifice everything personal, every individual desire. But I've learned that a queen who cuts herself off from human connection, excuse the expression, becomes isolated from the very people she's meant to serve. What are you saying? I'm saying that the Alliance has changed not just our governments, but our cultures. Threnodai nobility has always been bound by rigid protocols that prevented personal relationships outside carefully defined parameters. But if we're to truly work together with humans and Vorthak, we need to adapt our ways to accommodate new realities. Marcus turned to face her fully. Lyralii, let me finish, she said urgently. I'm not proposing anything that would compromise the Alliance or create political complications. But neither am I willing to pretend that what we shared meant nothing. You helped make me the queen I've become, and I want you to be part of the future I'm trying to build. In what capacity? As my closest advisor. As the person I trust most in the galaxy. As she hesitated, then seemed to gather her courage. As whatever we choose to become, within the constraints of our responsibilities. Marcus felt his heart racing. Are you sure? The political implications alone. I've spent 3 months considering every possible angle, she replied. The Alliance is strong enough now to withstand personal relationships between its leaders. In fact, such relationships might actually strengthen it by providing living examples of interspecies cooperation. And your people? The noble houses who expect their queen to marry within traditional boundaries. Queen Lyralii smiled, and in that expression Marcus saw both the woman he'd rescued and the ruler she'd become. My people need a queen who understands the wider galaxy, not one trapped by ancient prejudices. Besides, you wouldn't be the first person to marry into the royal line from outside Threnodai culture. Just the first human. Marry. Marcus's voice cracked slightly on the word. Eventually, if that's what we both decide we want. I'm not proposing immediate action, just possibility. Hope for something personal alongside our professional partnership. Marcus looked at this remarkable woman who'd become an even more remarkable queen, trying to process what she was offering. A chance to continue the work they'd begun together, to help build a lasting peace between former enemies, and possibly to explore the personal connection that neither of them had been able to forget. The ceremony tomorrow, he said finally. What exactly are you planning to announce? Your promotion to Director of Alliance Relations, with permanent status as my personal representative to the Tripartite Council. A position that will require you to work closely with all three governments, but based here so we can coordinate policy effectively. And the other thing? The personal aspect. That will be between us to explore privately. No public announcements, no political complications. Just two people who've already changed the galaxy learning whether they can change each other's lives as well. Marcus was quiet for a long time, looking out at the alien stars and thinking about the impossible journey that had brought him to this moment. 6 months ago, he'd pulled a stranger from a battlefield crater. Tomorrow, he would accept a position that made him one of the most important diplomats in galactic history. And, tonight, he was being offered the chance to build something personal with the most remarkable woman he'd ever met. Yes, he said finally. Yes to the job? Yes to all of it. The job, the responsibility, the possibility of something more. Marcus turned to meet her gaze. But I have one condition. What's that? If we do this, the professional partnership and whatever personal relationship develops, it has to be real, not a political arrangement or a diplomatic convenience. We both deserve better than that. Queen Lyralii smiled, and suddenly, she was just Lyra again, the woman who'd trusted him to keep her safe through hostile territory. I wouldn't have it any other way, she said. After all, you taught me what real partnership looks like. Someone who chooses to stand beside you not because they have to, but because they believe you're worth it. As they stood together on the balcony, watching the lights of the capital city spread out below them, Marcus realized that his greatest adventure was just beginning. He'd thought his story was about rescuing a princess from a battlefield, but it was really about two people learning to build something larger than either of them could achieve alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to prove that different species could not just coexist, but thrive together. But tonight was about possibility, about hope, and about the chance that two people who'd already changed the galaxy might find a way to change each other's lives as well. The rescue had been just the beginning. Everything else was still to be written. 5 years after the Tripartite Alliance Treaty was signed, Marcus Chin stood in his office overlooking the sprawling complex that had become the Alliance Diplomatic Corps headquarters. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see representatives from over 50 species working together in ways that would have been unimaginable when he'd first pulled an injured stranger from a battlefield crater. His desk held reports from human colonies requesting Vorthack protection for their expanding trade routes, proposals from Threnodai engineers for joint research projects with Terran universities, and applications from dozens of species seeking to join what had become known as the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. What had started as a desperate attempt to prevent war between three powers had evolved into a model for peaceful cooperation that was reshaping the entire galaxy. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. Marcus accepted the call, and Queen Lyralii's image appeared in holographic form above his desk. Even after all this time, seeing her still caused his heart to skip a beat. She wore the practical working clothes she preferred for day-to-day governance, her hair pulled back in a simple style that emphasized the intelligence in her violet eyes. "Good morning, Director Chun," she said formally, though her smile was warm and personal. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, maintaining the professional tone they used during recorded communications. "I trust the council session went well. Better than expected. The Zalani delegation has agreed to the trade standardization protocols, and the Corvin representatives are ready to sign the Mutual Defense Pact. Your recommendation about the territorial dispute between the Helix Mining Consortium and the Frontier Worlds proved exactly right. Glad to hear it. Any other business requiring immediate attention?" "Actually, yes. I'm transmitting the final approval documents for Project Renaissance." The council unanimously agreed that it's time to move forward. Marcus felt a surge of excitement. Project Renaissance was his most ambitious initiative yet, a comprehensive program to establish peaceful contact with species that had been isolated by the old conflicts. Teams of diplomats trained in the alliance model would reach out to former enemies and neutral powers alike, offering partnership instead of conquest or subjugation. "That's fantastic news," Marcus said. "I'll start assembling the contact teams immediately." "There's one other matter," Queen Lyralii continued, and something in her tone made Marcus pay closer attention. "I'll be traveling to Earth next week for the Alliance Day celebrations. Perhaps we could discuss the project details in person?" "Of course. I'll have a full briefing prepared." "Excellent. Oh, and Marcus." Her professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a more personal expression. "It's been too long since we've seen each other face to face." The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The past 5 years had been a delicate balancing act between their professional responsibilities and their growing personal relationship. They'd learned to work together as close partners in building the alliance, while carefully exploring what existed between them as individuals. It hadn't been easy. Royal protocol, political considerations, and the simple logistics of governing an interstellar alliance had meant that their time together was limited and often conducted under formal circumstances. But what they'd found in those brief private moments had proven worth the complications. Marcus's reflection was interrupted by his assistant. a young Threnodite diplomat named Zalthara, who'd proven remarkably adept at managing the complex schedules required by interspecies cooperation. "Director," she announced, "War Leader Korthike has arrived for your meeting." Marcus smiled as his old friend entered the office. Korthike had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Vorthak forces, but their friendship had only grown stronger over the years. The massive warrior had proven to be one of the Alliance's most effective advocates among species that respected military strength above diplomatic niceties. "Marcus," Korthike rumbled in greeting, "I bring news from the Outer Rim territories." "Good news, I hope?" "Very good. The Talon Raiders have agreed to negotiate. They want to meet with you personally to discuss terms for joining the Alliance." Marcus raised an eyebrow. The Talon Raiders were a confederation of species that had spent centuries preying on merchant vessels and isolated colonies. Bringing them into the Alliance would eliminate one of the last major threats to peaceful trade in that sector. What changed their minds? "Your reputation," Korthike replied simply. "Word has spread throughout the galaxy about the human who keeps his promises and treats all species with honor. They know that negotiating with you means negotiating in good faith. That's a lot of pressure to live up to. You have never failed yet." Besides, Korthike's expression became more serious. "There is another factor. The Raiders have heard rumors about the hegemony's expansion into uncharted space. They want protection more than they want continued independence." Marcus felt a chill at the mention of the hegemony. Intelligence reports from the galactic edge had been troubling for months. A militaristic empire was expanding aggressively, conquering or destroying everything in its path. So far they'd remained in unexplored regions, but their expansion trajectory suggested they would eventually encounter Alliance territories. "How much do we know about their capabilities?" Marcus asked. "Too little. But the species that have escaped them describe technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive. We may be facing a threat unlike anything the galaxy has seen. All the more reason to continue expanding the Alliance. If we're going to face something that powerful, we'll need every possible ally." Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the early warning network that monitored the galaxy's outer edges. The message was brief, but chilling. "First contact imminent. Unknown fleet approaching Alliance space. Request immediate consultation with Director Chun." Marcus and Korthike exchanged grim looks. The theoretical threat they'd been preparing for was about to become very real. "Assemble the council," Marcus ordered Zalthara. "Emergency session in 1 hour. And get me Queen Lyralii on priority channel." The next few hours passed in a blur of urgent consultations and rapid decision-making. The approaching fleet was massive, hundreds of ships using technology that Alliance sensors could barely detect. They'd emerged from unexplored space and were heading directly toward the heavily populated Centauri system. "Initial contact attempts have been unsuccessful," Admiral Martinez reported from the Alliance Command Center. "They're not responding to any form of communication we've tried." "What about their formation and approach pattern?" Marcus asked. "Classic conquest configuration. Heavy assault ships in the vanguard, support vessels in protective formation behind them. They're either planning to attack or trying very hard to look like they are." Queen Lyralii's image appeared in the council chamber's central hologram display. "Status report, Director. Unknown fleet, approximately 300 vessels, approaching Centauri space. No response to communication attempts. Configuration suggests hostile intent. Recommendations?" Marcus looked around the council chamber at the faces of beings from dozens of species who had learned to trust his judgment over the past 5 years. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but he'd faced impossible decisions before. "We meet them with our own fleet, but in defensive formation," he said finally. "Make it clear that we're prepared to defend ourselves, but also that we're not the aggressors. And I want to be on the lead ship personally." "Absolutely not," Queen Lyralii said immediately. "The risk is too great. The Alliance was built on personal trust and individual courage," Marcus replied. "If these beings are going to judge us, they need to see that our leaders are willing to put themselves on the line for what they believe." Korthike stood up, his massive frame commanding attention. "The human is right. I will accompany him. If they want to test our resolve, let them face warriors who have fought together. As will I announced Commander Tvara of the Zelani Collective, rising from her seat. The Alliance stands together. One by one, representatives from every major Alliance species volunteered to join the mission. What had started as a desperate defensive measure became a demonstration of the unity they'd worked so hard to build. The journey to the intercept point took 18 hours, giving the hastily assembled diplomatic fleet time to prepare. Marcus found himself in the bizarre position of planning simultaneously for first contact protocols and fleet engagement procedures. They had to be ready for anything from peaceful negotiation to total war. Contact in 30 minutes, came the announcement from the bridge. Marcus stood in the flagship's observation deck, wearing the formal uniform of his office but with armor underneath, a compromise between diplomatic protocol and tactical reality. Ships are coming into visual range, the sensor officer reported. Marcus watched as the alien fleet resolved into individual vessels on the main display. They were unlike anything he'd ever seen, sleek, organic-looking ships that seemed to flow rather than fly through space. Their hulls appeared to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted and adapted continuously. "They're beautiful," someone whispered, and Marcus had to agree. Despite their obvious military capability, the ships had an artistic quality that spoke of a civilization that valued aesthetics as well as function. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced suddenly. Audio only, but it's in standard. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was melodic, almost musical, but with an underlying harmonious quality that suggested multiple beings speaking in perfect synchronization. "We greet the alliance of species that builds rather than destroys. I am harmony singer Velnara of the Symphonic Collective. We have traveled far to meet those whose reputation for honor and cooperation has reached even the outer darkness." Marcus felt relief flood through him. "This is Director Marcus Chun of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. We welcome peaceful contact, Harmony Singer. Your approach formation had us concerned about your intentions. Forgiveness for the misunderstanding. Our ships array themselves for beauty and optimal travel efficiency, not for combat. We know nothing of war formations." The first meeting took place aboard the Alliance flagship, in a hastily reconfigured conference room that had been adjusted to accommodate beings whose physical structure was unlike anything previously encountered. The Symphonic Collective representatives were tall, graceful beings with skin that seemed to shift through different colors depending on their emotional state. Most remarkably, they moved and spoke in perfect coordination, as if they were parts of a single larger organism. "We have watched your alliance from afar," Harmony Singer Velnara explained. "The way you have transformed conflict into cooperation, fear into friendship. This gives us hope that our own situation might be resolved peacefully." "What situation is that?" Marcus asked. "The Devourers," another representative replied, and the entire delegation's skin shifted to darker, more troubled hues. "They follow behind us, consuming everything in their path. Entire star systems reduced to empty space. Billions of beings absorbed into their collective consciousness." Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. "How far behind you?" "Perhaps 6 months at their current rate of expansion. They will reach this region of space whether we are here or not. But, together, we might find a way to stop them." "What do you know about their capabilities?" "They are not conquerors in any traditional sense," Velnara explained. "They do not seek to rule or exploit. They simply consume, growing larger and more powerful with each system they devour. Individual resistance is futile. Only coordinated action by multiple civilizations might succeed." Marcus looked around the conference table at representatives from dozens of species who had learned to work together despite their differences. Now they faced a threat that could literally consume their entire civilization if they failed to stop it. "How much time do we have to prepare?" he asked. "Unknown. The Devourers move at their own pace, following patterns we do not understand. But when they arrive, there will be no negotiation, no mercy, no second chances." The emergency council session that followed was unlike any in the Alliance's history. Marcus presented the Symphonic Collective's information to leaders who had thought their greatest challenges were behind them. The reality of facing a force that could literally consume star systems forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. "What are you proposing, Director?" Queen Lyralii asked after the briefing was complete. The largest military cooperation in galactic history, Marcus replied. Every species, every fleet, every technological innovation we've developed, working together. And we need to reach out to former enemies, neutral powers, anyone who might have something to contribute. That could take years to organize, Admiral Martinez pointed out. Then, we'd better start now, Marcus said firmly. Because if we fail, there won't be anyone left to try again. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself coordinating the most complex diplomatic and military operation in recorded history. Project Renaissance was expanded far beyond